Hello, everybody, and welcome to joining Wise Learn and Earn. I am Anthony Romeo, Managing Director of Wise Components, and I'm truly happy that you all took the time out of your hectic schedules to join us today to talk to you all about Rosenberger, North America. I'm just going to say before we kick this off, if everyone can go ahead and mute their lines to ensure that we could clearly hear the presenters today going through the content. At the end of today's event, we are going to have a Q&A session, and we have a couple of cool little prizes to give away, so hopefully you guys stick through. We're going to try to keep this as entertaining and informative as possible. I know a lot of people have COVID fatigue with webinars every single day. So we appreciate for those of you that took the time to come and join us at Wise Components to learn more about Rosenberger North America. For those of you that are attending this event and would like to earn the one Bixie CEC, I would ask your email to Sean Kelly, and his information will be provided on this presentation, so that he can get that information to you. So with that said, for those of you who are not familiar with Wise Components, we are a stocking distributor of IT infrastructure that support layer one in the data center as well as the enterprise space. Since 1975, we evolved in the products that we have sold. So not only in 5G and IoT applications that serve the communities that we work and operate in, but also on the OEM front. So we're working with many manufacturers as well. Today's discussion is going to talk to you all about 5G and IoT applications and what makes up the edge and why is it become a necessity. I know Uptime Magazine and Uptime Institute Magazine has just wrote about the evolving factors of edge and why it's become more critical these days than ever before. So I welcome questions and the content that Sean Kelly from Rosenberger North America is going to bring to the table. But I want you all to realize and understand that as a quality, reputable, ISO certified distributor, Wise Components since 1975 has delivered on-time, defect-free materials. So we encourage that if you need tools or materials, please contact us. And after this event, we also ask that you take less than a minute to fill out our survey so that we can have future Wise and Learn educational events. We'd like to hear from you. What are some of the products and solutions that you're working on today, so that we could bring value add to your business and not just show up and throw up. That's not what we're about. With that said, we have newsletters. Wise Up newsletter goes out monthly, and you can find that on our own website at an about page at www.wisecomponents.com. And in addition to that, we kicked off in March of this year. We started our own podcast. Yeah, I can't believe it too. It's the wonderful, exciting world of infrastructure, right? But believe it or not, we have over 1,000 followers, and people are coming to us and listening to us, many of the manufacturers and service providers that are out there. And what makes the 5G and IoT applications work? It's the layer one infrastructure that is critical and crucial to the needs of the masses. So to ensure business continuity continues, we need to be working in a virtual world right now, more so than ever before. And some businesses were already prepared and others were not ready for the evolution. But without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor to Sean Kelly, Head of Enterprise and Data Center Applications of Rosenberger North America. Sean?
Hi, Anthony. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. I'm glad you're able to join us today. So the title of this webinar is Definition of an Edge Data Center 404 Not Found. And so we're gonna keep this kind of light but educational throughout the presentation today. But what we're gonna find is, there are a lot of lot of contributing factors to defining what an edge data center is, and even some of the other definitions of things that lead us to the need for an edge data center. And so we're going to kind of take a look at those and kind of what some of those needs are, the direction that things are headed in the future, and hopefully everybody will gain something valuable out of that. As Anthony had mentioned, I'm a head of application engineering for enterprise and data center at Rosenberger North America. I've been around this industry for 20 some years, mainly as a fiber focus with companies TE Connectivity, CommScope, and now Rosenberger. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Here are some other people dinging in, but we don't want to keep those that are waiting, that have been here waiting longer. So to start it off, there are a lot of buzzwords that we all hear in our world today. You know, any of these, as you see, 5G, latency, edge, cloud, all of these, they seem to be, everybody's talking about them in their day-to-day conversations. But the real question is, we use them, but do we really know what they mean? And I think that everybody probably on this call and people that you talk to will have their own little bit and piece of each of these that, you know, it's a snippet of something they know, or some people are absolute experts in these areas. But I think we all know enough about each of them, let's just say, to be dangerous, but we're not all experts in them. And for any one of these definitions, they're all pretty fluid and continuing to be developed and evolving. And so finding an exact definition for these, or actually an edge data center, is a lot like asking Siri what her favorite color is. And if you've never asked Siri what her favorite color is, this is the response. It's my favorite color. It's sort of greenish, but with more dimensions. And you know, with any of these, you'll hear people talking about 5G. Oh, that's cellular. Well, it is, and it isn't. There's a lot more to it than that. So when we're really talking about an edge data center, you'll also have many people that have their own idea of what an edge data center is. You know, some people might say it's smaller, closer. It's not like the cloud. Others will say it's physically close to the data source. It's that thing that makes the buzzwords work. So who is right and who is wrong? Are there some parts of the definition right, or some of them wrong? Is it in its entirety right or wrong? And how do we actually define it? Another question is, can we really define it? Do we have enough background information to truly define it as a concrete definition? So what drives the need for the edge? Albert Einstein once said, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. It is estimated by 2022 that there will be between 25 and 50 billion connected devices. Each one of those is going to be collecting and communicating lots of data. The real question that we get with all of this new data is, what do we do with it? Some data needs to be stored, some needs to be processed, some needs to be forwarded somewhere, and some was going to drive a reaction. So with all of this data, this definition, or this quote from Albert Einstein, will eventually read, soon everything that counts will be able to be counted, and everything that can be counted will eventually count. So this is giving us, the more data we're collecting, it's going to give us more insight to how that data can be used. And we're also going to experience a lot of data that we wish we could have collected and couldn't until now. And I have a little quiz question here for anybody who might be binary literate. Does anybody on the line know what that says? Okay, so it's actually lots of data. So just code it into binary just for a little fun there. So what do we do with all of this data? You know, there are devices I mentioned that are collecting data that we never thought would collect data before. Let's just take, for example, this Johnny on the Spot or Porta-John. A lot of these have Wi-Fi and cellular connectivity among them that are going to tell whether it needs serviced or maintenance or the device is almost full. It's going to send a signal to schedule a service. We'll also see where Fido's bowl is in soon need of attention, whether it's food or water, and that's going to be able to send a message to our cellular device or however else we're connected. And the irony of this is when I first developed this presentation, I put this part in kind of as a joke with the beacon inside the diaper, the disposable diaper, to send you a message saying real-time signaling that there is an immediate need for attention. Since I've done that, I believe 2 manufacturers of diapers have now come out with this technology that can connect and send you a message, or at least alert you. So, do they require different response times? The answer to that is absolutely. It's just like any data that we have. So this porta-john, for the most part, that's going to be a low response. If they can schedule that in a week or 2 weeks, it's probably okay. A moderate response would be Fido's bowl. He needs water, he needs food. Does it have to be drop everything you're doing and go do that right now? No. But on this final one, I would say that probably does require pretty much an immediate response. It's not going to be pleasant for anyone. So where that's also pointing us to is if we see those different levels of demand or response times, it also means that depending on how important and how fast that response time has to be, data can expire. And that's one of the things that we haven't necessarily thought about historically is, does the data we're collecting expire immediately and at what point? And there are times that in nanoseconds or milliseconds or even seconds or minutes that the data that has been collected is going to feed back to something real time, and it's invalid a minute later. And so that is going to lead us to latency. And if you might recall in the buzzwords at the beginning, latency was one of those buzzwords that we all might have a different definition for. And so look at this, dictionary.com. They mention it as time required online or in a network for one-way or round-trip transfer of data between 2 nodes. Similarly, Verizon Wireless states the time it takes for data to travel from one user over the network to the central processor and back again. And I think we could all agree that they kind of ultimately say the same thing, but they've been tweaked for different applications. And a lot like the data rate that we all want to our desktop in our offices. Everybody wants a gigabit or a 10 gig connection to their desktop, but do they really need it? Most people might peak at 10 meg, but the reality is they probably peak about 1 megabit per second. It's the same thing with latency. Everybody hears and say, well, if I have zero latency or almost no latency, I don't have to worry about any problems. But the real thing that we have to balance within latency is what is needed. Is it practical to be the lowest latency? And is it affordable? All of these factors are really going to tell you where your data should be stored, processed, forwarded, etc. While I was researching this, I actually found something that I think we're all coming into with our future technology. And that latency definition also comes from dictionary.com, where they say in virtual reality and other types of simulation, the discrepancy between the time delay of stimulus and response to the simulation as compared to the real world event. And why this is applicable is we all have in our human brain wiring. You've probably heard this, that if you're having a dream, and not to be morbid, but if you're about to die, your brain will wake you up. You will come out of that sleep. You will not die in your dream. And likewise, if you have a dream or something like that you've fallen off of a cliff, you will wake up before you have impact or before your body gets physically stunned, because your brain would react as if you actually physically hit the ground if you slept through that. And so where that becomes an area of concern as latency is if you're using some sort of virtual reality. So it's like, this is showing like an Oculus here, and the image obviously of a roller coaster ride. If you're on the world's tallest and fastest roller coaster and you're streaming this virtual reality, and there's a glitch in that, and you come to a complete stop from 100 miles an hour coming down this roller coaster midway and it stops, do we know how our brain is going to react to that from coming to an abrupt stop? because we're not sleeping. So that reaction that reaction function of our brain may not snap us out of that augmented or virtual reality. And so, that's I think that's why they have this in here. These are the things that we're hoping that these virtual reality folks are taking into consideration, and why we want this ultra low latency. So today, where is ultra low latency needed? What I'm showing here is my artistic as best as can be rendering of a smartwatch. And there are things that they're shown on this screen here that may not be able to be monitored today. We know that some of I think it's the new Apple Watch, the latest version has an EKG in it. It's always been able to monitor your beats per minute. But there are things that we're going to see evolve with that, with temperature, breathing rate, heart rate, different things like that. Knowing if you're drowning or struggling or something like that. And this is really kind of a gateway device, getting us used to this Internet of Things, the more and more devices that are going to be monitoring and making our world smart. So moving on, we're going to have those same types of monitoring, same sorts of detection, and all of the data working together when we're at work, at rest, and at play. Obviously, the irony with our COVID situation right now is most of us are not in a conference room like this because they're obviously not social distancing or wearing masks. And we're probably not so much at play like we're showing here. But what would happen is these devices will be able to communicate with other sensors within the room that may say that this gentleman here is all of a sudden his heart rate has doubled in the last minute, or that you're having irregular heartbeat or arrhythmia, or having a heart attack while you're locked in a hotel room at 3 o'clock in the morning. Or at play, this could be applicable like to COVID. We've seen some areas around the world that have put thermal sensors in that are monitoring people's temperatures as they walk through public areas. Any of these can create an alert. So it can be an alert to people around you, or something like this that could alert the front desk that there's an emergency happening here, and concurrently it's calling the emergency services to come pick you up. Likewise, these devices will be able to stream your historical, your heart rate, your breathing, whatever that pattern was. It'll be able to stream that to the emergency service folks, the hospital, the doctor, whoever that may be. Again, we're kind of at a getting us used to this type of technology. Beyond our personal, there are a couple other areas. So one of the others is predictive machine failure. And this is really critical, especially in the food industry, grocery stores, convenience stores, things like that. I just read recently, I believe that it was actually, I'm going to go back on that. It was outside of somewhere in eastern Maryland, Salisbury, Maryland, where a Walmart just recently lost. They had a generator failure or power failure that knocked out every bit of their frozen and refrigerated food section. And there have been studies saying that can range from hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars, depending on what the impact is to the particular business. So with the predictive machine failure, we're starting to see that there are listening devices. These listening devices are listening to every little bit of detail in the refrigeration, the compressors, everything, and looking for signals of irregularity. Something that, okay, at this given point in time, brand new, it sounded like this, it had this frequency, it had this beat, and now it's gone to something else, and which can prepare you for either maintenance or replacement, or an instantaneous kick on to a backup or some other source. And one of the biggest ones I think that we all have been probably keenly watching is the idea of autonomous vehicles. And we all know that there is a brand out there right now that can self-park itself, and it'll come to you, and it'll really can drive you home. There is a self-drive. You put in the passing, you can turn your turn signal on, and it'll automatically make turns for you on the highway. But those are a minority sort of vehicles that are on our roads today, and especially in larger cities, say like New York City. At a peak non-COVID time with traffic, there are a lot of people, perhaps pets, children, bicycles, cigarette stands, you name it, that everything has to be aware of what's around it to have a truly autonomous vehicle. And so all of these vehicles are going to be generating tremendous amount of data and also receiving data from all over and all these other devices around them and all the cars and things like that. And so we need ultra low latency. We need that car to be able to have the reaction time when someone steps out, or when the car stops short in front of it, or when traffic's building, or whatever it may be. Likewise, we also don't want latency to send the wrong signal to our car. And we want to go, and all of a sudden it decides it's going to pop a wheel and take off and run in the car right in front of it. So there are a lot of things that are coming into play that will have to be developed before we can have a full autonomous community, and those are going to require edge type of data centers, or smaller type of more localized data center on every block or every other block, or something like that, to get that instantaneous feedback. And then not only do they talk to the vehicles and other traffic signals around, they also need to be talking to all of the other ones around. So it's going to create kind of a mesh. So in traditional data centers, we have our core data centers, and it could be a colo data center, or whatever it may be, and they're going to be communicating with the near edge data centers, which is more, you need to get that data closer, obviously, to your device. And then as edge data centers, and this is what's really evolving, it's really the edge data center that continues to evolve. And we really, I think at this point, we could even actually add another layer to this. But what it's showing is the edge data center is really, it's talking to these individual Internet of Things or devices. And right now we're showing those closer to devices because we couldn't handle the latency of maybe going back to a core data center, things like that. So when we look at how the decision works for evolving this data from, say from point A to point B, we're going to take a look at this. And looking at this map, it's no, not everybody on the call is from the Eastern United States, but that's the graphic I'm showing here. And let's just say that our core data center is, we're looking at two of them, say Ashburn, Virginia, and Atlanta, Georgia. And with this, the example I'm going to use is kind of middle of our eastern seaboard is the Outer Banks of North Carolina. We're just going to use that as an example. So for general data, this business entity that's in the Outer Banks may choose to, their data may go to Ashburn and make a round trip back for just general data. It may go to Atlanta and back. It could go somewhere else. It could actually make multiple hops. It could go halfway across the country. It's all going to go to the path that's most efficient for the level of data and level of latency and response that's needed. But that particular entity now has, let's just say they need a quicker response time, and they don't want to pay the fees. There's some of these fees to the larger data centers. They might be able to get a little closer. So for their critical data, the stuff that they need a lower latency, they've engaged let's just say a smaller co-location data center, or a multi-tenant data center in Hanover, Virginia. What this is allowing them to do is, for their critical data, it's allowing them to make that shorter round trip a lower latency. But if we look back over to the left-hand map, we see the dark blue line as being their, let's say, their critical data. But the rest of their data is still then able to be spread from that intermediate data center to the larger core data centers, perhaps for long-term storage, backup, different things like that. So in this situation, we might be looking back, a couple years, and this was what we called an edge data center. So it's continually evolving, as you're going to see, because now, and this is just as shown, for example, because it happens to be a chain in that region. If we look at Food Lion grocery stores, there are 4 of them in this geographic area. And so let's just say that these individual stores now cannot stand for, I don't know what their process might be. It could be, instantaneous knowing what their inventory is, or their payables or credit card processing, or different things like that. It might be multitude of different systems. And so they've taken what they're calling now near real-time data that they want, and it can't handle that round trip. So they've repurposed an existing property that they've owned in close proximity to each of these stores. And this is now allowing each of the stores then to communicate with each other, as opposed to individual stores all going to the same location. And so this has created more of their own type of edge. And what that does is then turns what we previously thought of an edge data center into a near edge data center, or sometimes referred to as a fog data center. And so you might say, well, this is good enough and close enough. And there are a lot of, calculations that'll tell you what latency your particular system or your desire is going to be able to tolerate. And that could be, it could be 100 milliseconds, 10 millisecond, 1 millisecond, sub-millisecond. And all of that's going to determine whether this is okay, or this is okay. But we showed, I think in a previous slide or two ago, we showed the machine learning. And we want that machine learning, we want something like that to be as close as possible to the source. And likewise, you've probably heard over the past year about certain food chains being able to do an automatic self-checkout. You take a jar of pickles off the shelf in the grocery store and you put it in your cart. It takes the weight off the shelf, it's calculated, it recognizes the new weight in your grocery cart and saying, okay, Mr. Smith just put this back, this jar of pickles in here. And that's going to tally on your bill. And as soon as you walk out the door, you've paid for that and everything else. But you also have to have that real time that if Mr. Smith decides that he doesn't want his pickles anymore, that he's going to put them back on the shelf, and it subtracts it immediately out of the cart and recalculates the weight on the shelf, removes it from his bill, and he's not going to pay for that. So that's some kind of real-time data. And so what you'll start to see, and what we have started to see, and this even goes to even convenience stores as well, is we'll start to see people putting these unassuming, it could be a hut, it could be a shipping container, and sometimes it is located within the building itself if there is space, that they're putting a micro data center, a micro edge data center within the physical building. And this also happens with bank branches and certain other entities as well. And just to kind of give you an idea, inside these storage containers is where some of these now micro edge data centers are going. And these micro edge data centers, some of them, we have to plan for, is this going to be a conditioned area? Do they become self-conditioned? What about security? A lot of different things like this. But as we see, we've gone from originally going to a regional to a larger core, then to a regional, then to a close point edge, and now a real-time, what we're calling a micro edge data center. And this is going to continue to get smaller and smaller, or closer and closer to the data that's needed. So where do we find edge data centers? One of the major things that folks have always associated an edge data center with is geography. It's being close. And that definition of being close, again, all trails back to the latency requirement. Does it have to be within 1 mile, 10 miles, 100 miles, or 500 miles? Which latency can I tolerate? And, really when people are making the decision whether to spend the money to invest in an edge data center or get their data closer to the source, there are really 4 main factors that come into play. First, we've talked about the latency. The next is reliability, or your quality of service. Third is that proximity of data that we've always been talking about, and so that's kind of based off of those 2 requirements right there. But then we also have to balance that with the cost. And so, if it's going to cost you $1 million to put an edge data center inside your building versus the fees and everything that you're going to be paying to go to a regional, it doesn't make sense to build your own facility. But if you cannot stand the latency, or it's not a reliable data center or something like that, maybe that cost is valuable for yourself. The other thing with edge data centers that we want to keep in mind is they are not always single focused. Some of our other data centers have been kind of specific to certain functions. And what we're finding with edge, and especially when people are building out an edge, to help subsidize some of that cost, there are times where they end up being a sharing and offloading. So it can be your IoT. You may be able to create your own private cloud, or a regional cloud service, or we've seen some of these smaller ones turned into sort of a colo. So as the number of devices increase and latency requirements become more critical, cost and reliability of transporting and processing data will become areas of more concern and force the edge to locations almost unimaginable today. So in talking to quite a few folks in the industry regarding these topics, I think one of the things that most of us agree on is currently we're on the edge of the edge. We really don't know what the edge is going to look like or what it's going to evolve into, but we are getting more and more into edge computing and edge data centers. So what will they look like? Today, we might see a dedicated data center, a dedicated building that's a data center. We might see a section, we've seen sections where people have put an edge data center, a specialized edge data center within a larger data center, so a specialty function within a function. We're also, as I mentioned, now starting to see the idea of the micro data center, and that could be within the given building or within a tower shack. So at a base of a cell tower, again, getting back to some of that 5G stuff, you may have to have that edge data center right there. But that's not the same kind of edge data center that's necessarily going to go in a grocery store or in a bank branch or just in your own regional edge data center. But it doesn't stop there. That's kind of where we are today. But there are also, we've had talks with folks that, the next big one is going to be the mobile and temporary edge data center. You might say, well, where in the heck would I need something like that? And deployments on things like this be required in, military applications, say FEMA rescue areas. So if there's a natural disaster and FEMA is going to set something up somewhere, they need that communication. It's not only just the point-to-point communication, but it's going to be that storage, that response time. Where are people? What is real time? They're going to have that. And the other one that's very large is sporting events. In some cases, and let's just use PGA as an example. So you take a regular golf course, maybe not your municipal course, but you take a nice golf course that is just a golf course. And when there's a PGA event there are folks that come in and they turn that into a PGA city. It is everything from a banquet facility to awards facility to the bleachers, to the scoreboards, to the wireless communication, to the cameras. Everything is they're coming in and turning this up. And when they're done within 7 days, they rip it down and they go somewhere else, but yet they need that same thing. And it's going beyond what they can do with individual devices. And it's really coming down saying, I need to replicate a low latency data center in this micro city that I've just built and be able to tear it down and go. Again, getting that response closer to the source. We've all heard over the last 20 years about smart neighborhoods. I remember, it was 25 years ago, I was living in Columbus, Ohio, and I moved to a neighborhood and I had videophone. I could see the pool in the neighborhood, someone that came to the gate to come into the neighborhood, and they kind of the guard would say, do you know this person? You can look in the car, see who the person is. Yes, allow them to come in. There are, neighborhoods I've seen in Texas. I've visited them over the years where they've gone even further, where it's house-to-house communication and different things like that. Well, we also are now getting into some of our smart appliances, and some of the smart appliances are either communicating. Let's just say for your refrigerator, you empty something, you scan the barcode across it, it makes a grocery list for you and automatically sends that to the grocery store and say, I need this delivered. Or it might be, as we move forward, getting into your oven and your microwave and things like that, where you might have a food and says, well, I need to cook this, I don't know, whatever that it is, a steamable vegetable, and it says, cook on medium to high for 4 to 7 minutes. Well, gee, go get your manual, find out what the wattage of your microwave is and such. Who's doing that? You simply wave the barcode at it. It communicates instantaneously with the manufacturer of the microwave or the oven and with the food vendor, and says, oh, this is actually going to go for 4 minutes and 37 seconds, and it's going to be perfectly done. Same goes with your washer and dryer. There are a lot of different these smart devices. And then we also look at what we're getting teased at right now, as I mentioned earlier, like with the smartwatches. That's giving us a tease of what the future is going to be with on-body or on-person communication devices, where also in our homes, you've got people that have the Alexa and the Google Home and the Apple, I don't know what they call that thing, the speaker, different devices that you can that communicate with your Nest and all these other smart individual devices within your home. And they're always obviously listening, communicating, preparing. They're getting us used to having that kind of always communicated technology. And so as those things evolve over the years, within our neighborhoods, those devices are going to want to communicate with each other, because you're going to see, okay, what trends happening here, what temperatures can we automatically adjust everybody's air conditioning for power consumption, different things like that. And we may end up having these type of micro edges later on in a particular neighborhood. So we've really focused prior on commercial type of data and things like that. But we may end up seeing these now evolve into the neighborhood. Going beyond that, and this could be 20 years down the road, but we may have so many devices that are going to interact with each other that need to be listening to what your furnace is doing, or what your outdoor air handlers do, or I forget what they call that thing, doing just any type of communication. Again, we're looking years and years out. But we may end up having something, it's not going to be a 7-foot rack, but we may end up having that true edge computing, kind of a centralized just for your home, that's also then going to communicate to the neighborhood. And throughout the research that I was doing on this, when I had first created this, I read a number of things about different cellular carriers and their collaborations with the device manufacturers that are looking to evolve the handsets that we carry over time. And what that, if we look at what that does, right now, let's just say we use, I'm just going to call out Waze, as our GPS as we're driving down the street. We know that we can manually put in a hazard, and then all of the other drivers out there that are around will see that as it's gone to some satellite or gone somewhere to come back to someone else's device and says, oh, gee, there's a car alongside the road. Using that as a moderate as an example, same thing goes with your photos and your cloud videos and anything like that. Everything is really processed and stored on your device, and your individual device is communicating with some outside entity. The goal eventually is to make our devices not have any personal storage or personal compute on the device itself. The idea is that the device and the others that we'll be wearing on us, like the watches or other devices, are going to communicate and create a mesh with all the other devices around you, where they can collectively share bandwidth for a signal, where they can collectively say, I'm going to host pictures on Joe's phone that cover the first closest 100 people. And it's kind of a dynamic shift. That technology has to continue to be developed. But the idea is eventually the goal will be to have our devices on us being as small of an edge compute as you possibly can have, that's going to communicate with everyone around you. It is kind of scary stuff, especially in today's world where we hear about people, microchipping and different things like that. At the end of the day, we're all being monitored and, tracked anyway. But it's just kind of giving you an evolution of what we see today. And as it evolves, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So edge data centers are defined as more from their function of being close to the data source than appearance or physical location. In the future, what we consider an edge may be much different than what we can imagine today. It will be interesting to look in 20 years to see where we are in this scale. So when we have these edge data centers, again, we're kind of looking back now to the fixed micro edge or fixed edge. Like a lot of even larger data centers, they're hiding in plain sight. You can drive down the road and you see this building with no windows and say, I wonder what's in that. To the average person, they're going to say, I do wonder what's in that. And I think most of us in the call are probably going to know what's inside those type of buildings. That they're going to be a data center. And likewise, if a grocery store chain or a 7-Eleven or something like that is um, putting their micro edge in a shipping container or just this odd looking block building that they built in the back of their parking lot, saying, what are they storing there? Trash cans? What is this? You don't know that it's there. But when you're doing that and these micros are sitting in plain sight, they need to be kind of self-sufficient. And so what you're going to see, or what you are seeing today in the market across a number of manufacturers, are having these self-contained cabinets that are acting like a full-blown data center, a full-blown telecom room, where they'll have a full air conditioning unit, and it's going to give you a hot aisle, cold aisle. They'll have built-in battery packs and UPS. Um, Power distribution meant specifically for the cabinet, or as these might be go out to 5 or 10 or 15 cabinets, where you have a centralized management. The monitoring host is really giving it almost like a DCIM or DSIM situation, where you can monitor absolutely everything there. You can monitor the cooling, how full things are with the power consumption, adjust, do any of these controls. So they're becoming smaller, and they're going to be requiring they're going to be more self-contained and function different than the traditional data centers that we're looking at today. And one of the other things, and this is probably one of the most critical, and if anybody has read ICT Today or regularly reads that, back in the April, May, June issue of this, I don't remember if it's 12 pages or so, where this presentation was turned into a more detailed article in that. And there were contributions from folks from TIA and some other entities out there. And through the discussions as we were writing that particular article, or getting some I'll say counter input or alternate perspective, to keep everything balanced, one of the big things that came up was the concerns of these being unmanned. If you're putting them in an existing larger data center or a corporate type of data center, there are a lot of security measures. There are cameras, door locks, different things like that are preventing unwanted intrusion or physical damage and things like that. And the manufacturers and the folks that are designing and installing those type of micro edges that I just showed, their key focus is not what's on the door on the shipping container or the block building, but really protecting the data and being able to monitor that data and not having someone there 24/7, 365 to know exactly what's going on. So I kind of mentioned that DSIM type of system. So this is just showing screenshots from one embodiment, one brand, one type of these micro edge data centers, where on the front LCD screen, you can tell what your power utilization is, your efficiency. You can have any alarms you want. You can alter the air conditioning, your power volumes. You can drill down into any of these and take a look at what any of the systems are in there, the fire suppression, or fire monitoring, the cooling, the H compressor, when you had a temperature spike, anything that you want. And these things can all also be via cellular or wireless, communicating with your personal device, a tablet or a smartphone, your computer, whatever it may be. And this is allowing multiple of these edge data centers to be managed by one person or a small team of people, that they rarely ever have to physically go on site to check something. They really can check everything that's there. But the security part of it is probably the thing that's more important than having even this monitoring. And so one of the things is early versions of these micro edge data centers, they simply had a key lock and not a lot of monitoring. And so the newer ones that are starting to come out are going to have the facial recognition, thumbprint recognition, or fingerprint. It can be fingerprint, and even speech recognition. You're even starting to see some of them now when the doors open that they'll have cameras. So if someone was able to somehow or another breach the enclosure that this was in and get into these cabinets, you know, and bypass the biometrics and things like that, that you would actually have a camera on the inside that is monitoring whose face is there, who has opened it, who is doing what inside of that. And that was a really big concern with I'll say privatizing the edge, people moving their data onto their own physical plot of land without the larger security. So you're seeing people that are of all areas, not only people making the equipment, but there are people in standards and things like that that are looking at all of this, saying, how do we make sure that this is just as secure and just as reliable as what we would have in a larger functioning regional data center. So as we come back here, we see these three characters here again, and you know, their definitions have changed a little bit. You know, meets the latency requirement. It's close proximity to data source and response locations. It's reliability and cost balance. That kind of all goes back to that little globe though I showed a little bit ago, and had the kind of the spider web showing where you might have your core, your fog, your edge, and your micro edges going out. So with all of this, you know, and taking a little bit more of a forward look into life, we have a definition that's almost found. So one of the, I guess the best way that we can sum up everything we've talked about and everything that people are seeing in an evolving technology, where the definition of edge is picked up off of evolving definitions of those buzzwords that we looked at earlier, we can say that it's a constantly evolving, size-independent space containing switch, storage, and compute equipment located geographically close enough to meet the response and latency requirements of the applications while balancing cost and reliability to achieve expected results. I don't think we're going to see that in dictionary.com because it is obviously fluid, but these are kind of the constants, and that has really, you know, told us what it looks like, but it's still not physically what an edge looks like. So only time will tell what an edge data center will look like and how we'll define the future. For now, we can only speculate it'll be sort of greenish, but with more dimensions, while adhering to the principles mentioned in the definition above. So I think we're going to open it up to some Q&A. Again, the goal of this was to keep it thought-provoking, light, while also being educational. So I'm sure folks out there listening may have some questions or even comments, or feel free to even mention, you know, what you've done with the edge or micro edge or things like that. So if you, at this time, if you
Sean,
unmute, yes, go ahead, Anthony.
Sure. Thank you so much for highlighting Rosenberger products and solutions that are in the data center. Many of the folks that are listening on the call, I'm not 100% sure if they're aware of who Rosenberger is as a whole, as an entire entity. This is one facet of the enterprise data center of Rosenberger North America. Just to, you know, hone in on that, Rosenberger's been around for several decades. A global manufacturer in the enterprise and data center space. I know we didn't really go into great lengths, and that's not what today's call or webinar was about. But I just want to reiterate that to everybody that took the time today, so they're aware where Sean, you are coming from, not just you know, Pennsylvania, Akron, PA, but Rosenberger is a privately held company based out of Germany, with several divisions in wireless, manufacturing, and several others. Again, just to reiterate, this is one division talking to you today about the products on the edge in the data center market. This content, or I should say this webinar, with the content-rich information that was provided today, would give you one CEC credit for Bixby. So I put in the comment section Sean's contact, and you see it up on the screen as well. If you do require the CEC credit, please be sure to contact Sean at his email address. or his number for that matter. For more on Rosenberger products or infrastructure layer one infrastructure products, please reach out to the folks at Wise Components, and we can be found at www.wisecomponents.com, or feel free to reach out to me directly. Be happy to help. But with that said, I just wanted to point out, this is not a mom and pop shop, because Rosenberger really truly hasn't established a role in America, in North America, and I just want to make sure that the brand recognition and the understanding of the value add that the manufacturer is bringing to the table is clearly defined, so that you all know that are on the call today are innately aware of where they're coming from, and that we're bringing it to your via distribution. So any questions at this time?
Yeah, and Anthony, just to reiterate that if anybody that does need the BICSI certificate, certificate to get your CECs, again, use my email, Sean Kelly at Rosenberger NA for NorthAmerica.com, and I will generate that. Please put your name, how you'd like to see it on the certificate, and I'll do that, and I will send a PDF copy of that back to the email that requested it. And then you're able to submit that to BICSI. It is recognized for one CEC. And just real quick, that just kind of showing here that yes, we do participate in this type of equipment here for the micro edge, but we are also a tier 1 cable connectivity and apparatus for all layer 1. So and Wise Components does distribute all of that for us.
And we're also going to be taking the opportunity to send you all a survey. It'll be found in the notes section, as well as it could be found on LinkedIn, where you might have saw or received the invite. We ask that you take the opportunity to take less than a minute to do that, so that for future events, we're able to improve upon in many ways. With that said, I open the floor for questions at this time. Question. Cricket. I'm sure a lot of people are inundated with webinars, and time is value. So with that said, as managing director of Wise Components, again, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the opportunity to meet with us today virtually. In the event that we were able to come into your business, as we've done in years past, and conducted several lunch and learns with the consultant community, the end user community, as well as the contracting community that we serve. We're providing quality products every day. When others hit pause, we've been hitting play. We're operating in a safe environment, ensuring that our trucks are being disinfected every single day, products are being inspected every single day, and disinfected to ensure the safety and well-being of you all, as well as the customers that you are or the customers that you serve, to mitigate risk and ensure business continuity. So rather than ramble, I would say, Sean.
Yes.
Question for you, right?
Okay.
With the edge being the way that you had said in one of the slides, what the edge is looking like, do you anticipate, due to a COVID world or a COVID type world that we're living in today, do you see, I know you mentioned several times 20 years, what's going to look like? Do you see, because of COVID and the way we're operating in the remote type of world, do you see that 20 years being significantly reduced in being sped up is what I'm.
Yes, I do think you asked a very good question, Anthony. So yes, the world of COVID, as cliche it is to hear the new norm, there are things that are driving this. I mean, right now, as you see schools around our country struggling to decide if they're going to be virtual, they're in person, a hybrid. We're also seeing quite a few businesses, obviously, large scale companies. I think we've seen some in the Bay Area that have said that their people don't have to come back to a physical office until at least July of 2021. You're looking at almost a year out. That's a lot of people that have relied on corporate servers and corporate intranets or intranetworking within their buildings, and now this is all spread out, and it is taking a toll on a lot of our communications, whether it is cellular, whether it's our home internet, being able to accurately store those files and not have them have it in real time collaboration as we're doing today. So yeah, I think that there is going to be more of a drive towards the edge, more investment out of companies to do this. I think we're also probably going to see a lot more monitoring within stores and restaurants and things like that, because it's quite honestly, it's driving people absolutely crazy. Whether you're wearing the mask, or you have to walk this direction, or you have to sit 6 feet away, or
Right.
stand 6 feet away. So there are going to be, I think, a lot of things that are going to be maybe data collection, not personal data collection, but they're going to have that real-time mitigation and real-time warning to say, okay, look.
Hey, Sean.
Yes.
I see there's another question. Not to
Sure.
interrupt, but you did
That's fine.
answer it. So
yeah.
I see there's a question. Are there any current applications of the edge data centers in the highways and city streets to your knowledge at this time?
Not publicly. The only one that I do know is like what Uber has been doing in Pittsburgh, for the self-driving, that analysis there, and I believe that Tesla has been doing some similar things as well. But no, nothing for that infrastructure that I have been involved in or seen.
Yeah, and one of the recent articles I read, just to share with all of Uptime Institute Technology, was talking about edge solutions. How 80-20 rule, everybody knows, regardless of what industry you're in, they were saying that 20% of the edge is coming, and it predominantly due to what's going on because certain businesses weren't set up to operate in a remote manner. So they now, as you pointed out, Sean, in the one example of the latency issues and cost factor, where the geography map you laid up, I think it was a Florida or North Carolina, and showing how close in proximity in that box up on the screen that you have there, where you pointed out the characteristics. I would point out that the Lyra product that Rosenberger offers, that you went into, that product there, some of the specifics we did not cover as far as what it's supporting up to in KW. I know that in my own experience with it, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I thought it was support up to 20 kW, depending on the configuration.
So additively, yes, because like one air conditioning unit might not handle 20 kW across the route, so you have to have that kind of split and have a new air handler and say rack 3 or something like that. But yes, you could theoretically go up to that. I think within a cabinet itself, it's about, I think it's 7.5 kW is really what it's able to truly cool. Yeah.
Okay.
But Anthony, I did want to just step back. The question you asked, or the question that came in from the audience, about those, like the smart streets and those micro edges. As far as a finished good, the way I answered it was as a finished good. I will say, as Rosenberger, we're a key player in this, as well as some other large connectivity companies, building the sensors that are going into the cars and onto the street lights, and that are going into that network of things. So we're heavily involved in that, as are a number of other companies. And there are pilots of those. I know there are some in Europe that are pilots of those, but I don't know what it's saying about what is that central processing part. So, but there is work being done. It's not like this is just totally hypothetical and nothing's been started towards that. There definitely have been evolutions. Some of that even goes over to some of the rental bikes and rental scooter solutions as well. That's an easy way to get some of this stuff deployed and get a real time out of that.
And from what I read into it, I don't really think it's the technology that's holding it back. I think it's the insurance and liability. I read something from Warren Buffett not too long ago saying that the insurance industry is, and you pointed out in your presentation today, is like, is that thing going to jump the turnstile and kill somebody? Who's liable? Is it the manufacturer of the vehicle? Is it the manufacturer of the software? Is it the driver in fault? I mean, who?
And I think a lot of that
be accountable.
Right. And a lot of that comes back to probably the third or fourth slide when it says, when I had the Einstein quote and then all of the new data, and we still don't know what to do with that data. I don't think there's anybody that's going to argue the fact that a computer in real-time data is going to have a more consistent reaction time and more precise input than a human. It's going to be, your reaction time from human to human varies. You start getting intoxication, being tired. There's a lot of different things that come into that we know, I think, and even the insurance folks and everybody knows that it's there. It's just making sure that that data collection, that reliability, that low level of latency is able to at least match the human brain in reaction time, but also exceed it. And there's just not enough background data on that to
Right.
to do their risk analysis. And I think that's where that's coming from, that concern that Warren Buffett had said.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. So any other questions at this time via the text, or feel free to speak now? Okay. Well, with that said, let me just reiterate thanks to everybody for taking the opportunity to join us today on the WISE Learn and Earn educational virtual event. We would love to be doing this in person as we've done in past, and since 1975 provide value-add products and service, on-time deliveries. We want to ensure that you know who WISE is, and we hope that you come to us for your layer one infrastructure needs to support your business, whatever that be, consultant, end user, or contractor.